All right, everyone. Welcome to Midwest Mountaineering's Outdoor Adventure Expo. With me today, I have Paul Siegel of Luna Rose Canoe Adventures. He's going to be presenting on exploring the Namekagon and doing some guided river expeditions. If you're unfamiliar with the Namekagon, it's over in our across the river, the St. Croix, there in Wisconsin. Without further ado, here is Paul.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here this morning. I want to talk to everybody about my favorite river, the Namekagon. So the river, just as far as where it's at, and indeed it is right nestled right there in northwestern Wisconsin. Geographically, it's about an hour south of Duluth, and if you're coming from the cities or St. Cloud, it's a hour 45 drive. So an hour and 45 minutes to drive from Minneapolis. So it's pretty close. And, it's a couple hours from Eau Claire. So it's really pretty easy to get to, pretty close, but it feels far away when you get there because it's a true wilderness. The river runs through completely federally protected lands. It's the St. Croix National Scenic Waterway. So you're going to have very little development on any section of the river. Some more so than others. I mean, it's a total of 252 miles if you combine the Namekagon and the St. Croix, at least the section that's within the protected zone, the riverway. We're going to focus primarily on a section that I run, about a 30-mile section near Danbury, Wisconsin. That's kind of where my headquarters are, and I run my trips kind of headquartered out of Danbury. But there's also the town of Trigo, and then there's other areas that are further down the St. Croix, which we won't touch on. I don't explore that section. And there's also the upper reaches, upper Namekagon, which we can talk about when we get there. It's a little trickier because of water conditions and low water. You can really only run it in the spring. But the whole riverway offers just a really diverse collection of types of water you'll experience, limited rapids, and just beautiful camping opportunities. Um, One of the reasons I like the Namekagon so much is it's um, 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 just filled along the entire way. There's rustic campsites along the way, so you can just have paddle in campsites where you'll be able to just pull your canoe over. They are developed by the National Park Service, so there's probably 2 or 3 tent pads there, a fire ring, and a pit toilet. But it's completely private, completely remote, and there's dozens and dozens of these sites along the way. They're well marked. You just pull over, and when you get tired, you pull over and make your site for the night, and then the next morning you push off and you just travel on down the river. Um, I'm going to move on to a picture of the Namekagon for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. This is a section, just a very typical section of the Namekagon River. You can see that there's some fast flowing water. The water's usually pushing you at 3 or maybe even 4 miles per hour if it's at high water, but you're not going to really encounter difficult rapids. This is considered a beginner class river. You especially have a guide with you, you can learn very quickly how to navigate this. So it's a good starter river for people who want to maybe move off of the flat water and try a little bit of whitewater. But when I say whitewater, that's it's really hard to get into trouble on the Namekagon. When the Namekagon meets the St. Croix, the river widens out quite a bit, a lot more volume, and there's maybe the possibility of getting into trouble on the St. Croix. I don't bring my tours that far down, but it's beautiful on the St. Croix as well. And maybe it moves from a class 1 river to more of a class 2 river. And that's just simply because the hydraulic power of the St. Croix is much more. But as you can see from this picture, you might get some rocks in here, but a couple riffles here. But these are areas that you can, if you stay in the center, you're just going to float over all the stuff. And it's if you've never done any whitewater canoeing, it's all about picking the line and taking the right course, usually center channel, and then you're going to avoid any sort of rivers, so any sort of rapids. Well, let's see. Let's look at the map. I love maps. I don't know if everybody else loves maps as much as me, but let's take a look at the section that I typically guide on, which is about a 35-mile section of the Namekagon, which would be, this is the long 30 miles of Namekagon. And then this section here is the St. Croix, just a little bit. And just for orientation, where I'm swinging, Danbury, the town that I'm centered out of, is just right over here off map. Yeah, let's talk about this river and this section of river. As you can see, there are bridges crossing at maybe a half dozen points. That's really the only developed civilization you're going to see, is when some of these highway bridges come across. And that's typically where you're going to find a landing, meaning there's a place to pull your car or your trailer over. You launch at those locations, and then travel down to a downriver location, one of these landings where you're going to take out. So maybe we'll just talk about this going from upriver near the town of Trago. This is the other city that is close by and services at least this section of the Namekagon. Working our way downriver, let's just talk about the reservoir here, which I do not paddle through. I mean, it's not bad, but there's a dam. The deal is there's a dam right here, and I start all of my trips just below the dam for the obvious reason. You can portage around these dams, but I am a firm believer, after decades and decades of portaging on the boundary waters, I avoid portages on the Namekagon. This is a great, and I'll touch more on this. It's a great thing about the Namekagon River is, or any river, or most rivers, is you're not having to do a lot of portaging, and there's zero portages on this section of the Namekagon. So this is County K. It's a landing, a well-developed parking lot landing where you put your boats in. And then to just give you the big picture, if you traveled the whole 35 miles down to Riverside Landing, which I do typically, you do that in 3 days. It's 3 easy days. I don't push my clients hard to do 15 and 18 mile days. We do smaller days. Of course, you can launch anywhere. I sometimes launch at Whispering Pines for a 3-day trip, because you come in here and then you have a much shorter trip. And then for people who are just interested in day trips, there's obviously many places that you can just, for example, come in at McDowell Bridge Landing down here, and then you just have maybe a 6-hour paddle down here. And if you don't like sleeping outdoors, you can still experience the Namekagon without any camping at all. So those are kind of the 3 trips that I run. My company, Luna Rose Canoe Adventures, fully outfits, and I'm a river guide on all these trips. So I just love bringing people down this river, or any river, or the boundary waters. I do that as well. But the Namekagon is a really special place. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about all these little tents. Okay, so all these are campsites, and then these bigger campsites are called group campsites. They're just basically a beefier version of any of these smaller triangles. So I find most of these sites have a decent landing. The Park Service puts them there, so you're not having to drag over rocks or logs to get to your campsite. There's sometimes even a little beach on some of them. And then when you get in there, they're almost always 3 tent pads at a campsite, which allows, you can get 8, 9 people in there without being too cramped. Now, if you're coming down in a larger group, that's where, meaning if you got a dozen people, you're going to want to stay at the larger tents, which are called group sites, and it just is a larger clearing, more room. Typically, there's a picnic table. It's nice. The group sites are typically have a picnic table, so it's nice. But they're all rustic, primitive. There's pit toilets. If you're don't like using pit toilets during the day or whenever you're at a landing, any of these landings and all these landings have vault toilets. So they're not flush toilets, but they're more developed with concrete walls and all that sort of stuff. So on any of these bold landings, Howell, Whispering Pines, they all have got pit toilets on them, vaulted pit toilets. So it's camping, but I don't consider it as really roughing it because as somebody who's gone backpacking and Boundary Waters and all these other more remote things, with the Namekagon, you're able to bring chairs and folding tables and big tents and real heavy food and drink because you're I don't want to call it glamping, but it's a lot easier because this is the big thing. You don't have to portage. Since you don't have to portage, and if you have a canoe that's large enough cargo capacity, you can bring the kitchen sink. You can bring everything. And my boats, I usually travel with a group of 4 boats, 8 people, and we can bring just a ton of equipment. And it's apart from maybe at the landings having to deal loading the trailer up, but you're just not having to deal with portages. So let's move away from this slide, and I want you guys, maybe we'll go back just to mix things up, go back to the place that we're talking about and loving, the Namekagon. So this river and this whole experience really differs from some of the other Midwest options for canoeing. If you just compare it to some of the other rivers in the area, it would be the Brule, the Peshtigo, the Wolf, and the Flambeau are all incredible. These are all in Wisconsin and actually not too far away from one another. But the reason I choose the Namekagon is because of the access to camping and the mildness of the rapids. I love all those 4 other rivers, but some of them have class 3s and some of them have class 4s that you have to portage. And most of them have not as good of camping conditions. So if you are looking at other rivers, I love them, and nothing against the Brule. I just love the ledges, the Peshtigo, the Wolf, the Flambeau, but the Namekagon is just, it's just a different experience. I'm not going to say it's better. I love it, but it's just a different experience. The other thing to compare a river trip like this to, and this is not really a direct comparison because there's no place like the Boundary Waters. I love the Boundary Waters, and I've just done dozens and dozens of trips up there guiding in the Boundary Waters. But that is again, like I talked about, the portaging is just such a different experience. And they call the Namekagon the mini Boundary Waters because, as you can see from this photograph, it's just as lovely as the Boundary Waters. It's almost could be like you're in Quetico. Apart from seeing highway bridges, every once in a while, you're really deep in nature. You're really able to embrace, and you feel completely removed. Again, a benefit over the boundary waters is most of us, if we certainly live in the cities, the Twin Cities, or anywhere else in Wisconsin, this is much easier to get to than driving all the way up the Gunflint Trail or even Ely. So it's a opportunity. And the trips I run with Luna Rose Canoe Adventures are typically weekend trips. You can just do the Namekagon on a 2 nights over a Friday, Saturday night. And you can't do that with the Boundary Waters. It's just, or you wouldn't want to try and do that with the Boundary Waters. I love longer trips. But with that said, it's kind of funny. You can do 10 days on the Namekagon and the St. Croix. You'll have to encounter some dams and portages along the way, but you could go a very long way on this river system. You could start all the way up at Hayward Dam and go all the way. Hell, you could almost go to the Twin Cities on the St. Croix. So it's possible to do longer trips, but the trips I run are 3-day trips over the weekend. And then midweek, I do 4-day trips for people who can do it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I run trips all summer long. And then I do Boundary Waters on the shoulders. May and September, I do my Boundary Waters trips. So it keeps me happy. And I think most of you out there, if you're inexperienced, if you've done these canoe trips, you know how special it is. And for folks out there who've never done a Boundary Waters or a river trip, it's a real treat. Not sure what to expect this season. Last year it was, as if you're all outdoor people, maybe you have heard about how the Boundary Waters was so overcrowded. There was 22% increase in permits because of coronavirus. People loved going. People started going outdooring. And I actually had trouble. You couldn't find a campsite up in the Boundary Waters. And the Namekagon got busy too. So I'm not sure what we're going to have this year. I still have lots and lots of vacancies on my trips with that. Speaking of which, maybe I'll go to, because there's probably some late comers. This is my contact information and my company. Like I said, Luna Rose is completely outfitted. I outfit all the equipment, all the food, all the transportation is all taken care of. That you really just show up with a pair of shoes that you don't mind getting wet. I ask people to bring a rain jacket, and other than that, you can just show up and everything's taken care of. So I obviously cater to first-time people who have no equipment or have no experience and would like to have a guide, because I bring people down and show them how to do the rapids. But I also have, experienced folks who just want, hell, I'm just going to have Paul take care of everything. So it's a way that it's a very accessible and close river, the Namekagon. It's easy to get to. And it's just, obviously, if you go through an outfitter like myself, it's going to be no worries. I provide the best food, the best equipment, lots of fun times. So I just love sharing. It's mostly, I just love sharing the wilderness with people, and this river in particular. Well, let's see. We've got maybe time to go to Q&A, perhaps. I've got. Well, let's, before I go to Q&A, let's just look at this one more time. It will perhaps help people who do have questions and answers to look at the map. Yeah, maybe I'll keep this slide up, because this slide tells it all. It tells the story of the section that I run on. Didn't go over the other, because that's not my area of expertise, but I will let everybody know that upriver from Trago it is beautiful. There's lots of nice camping, but when you get too far upriver, the water levels can be an issue. And the other thing is there's this Trago Dam, and then also up near Hayward, there's a dam at Hayward, and it's unless you're an ultralight person and don't mind carrying, your gear around these dams. But I've decided with my business to just avoid the upper section of the river. And likewise, if you come downriver of the St. Croix, I always take out at Riverside Landing. But there's no reason that you couldn't, if you're doing your own trip, you could push beyond Riverside. And there's kind of some towns you go through. It's not quite as wild, but if you're looking for a week-long trip, you do it. And I do custom trips. Actually, anybody out there, I do custom trips to the Boundary Waters, and any time and day that you want to go, I can many times accommodate private parties or special parties where people, I'm a real, it's really a hands-on, don't have a real strict idea about the way all my trips are run. So if people want to do a shorter trip or a longer trip, or if they want a base camp, there's all sorts of possibilities. There's some beautiful sites on the Namekagon that you could actually set up to just, for example, if you like fishing. So you might want to just spend a layover day on the Namekagon. The fishing part is great if you're an angler. There's trout everywhere. There's smallmouth, and I have found the best way, or my favorite way. There's not really the best, but my favorite way to fish is actually not to fish from the canoe, but to pull over, jump out, fish for 10 minutes, paddle 10 minutes downstream, do the same thing, and just slowly work your way down the river. I've also done it the other way, where the person who's in the stern is kind of controlling the boat, and whoever's up in the bow can be casting. There's nothing wrong with that way. You're a team together fishing, and it keeps the boat moving. The danger of doing it the first way is you'll take forever to get down the river because you're pulling over to fish all the time. So you have to be careful that you haven't planned a 15-mile day with fishing, because you're just going to be pulling into your campsite, at sunset. So that's the deal. So I will leave this slide up, and we can throw it open to Q&As. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have about the Namekagon.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Excellent. I got a question that came in. Someone asking if there's any particular stretches you recommend for an overnight or two with small children, 6 and 3.
So I'm glad we're on this slide, because I can kind of talk about probably the more tranquil areas. Can you tell me again, what are they looking for? Just a single overnight or a 2-night? How long of a trip were they looking?
Looks like 1 to 2 night.
1 to 2. So I will point out the 2-night option, which would be putting in at Whispering Pines and traveling down to Riverside for 2 nights. That's gives you, and the way that I work that is, I don't know where this person is coming from, but I build in, assuming you're going to have like a couple hours of drive in the morning. You drive up, you get on the river by noon, you do a half day, and then a full day, and then another full day, and then you're out in the hopefully early afternoon to drive back to wherever you live, because most people are going to be within 1 or 2 or even 3 hours away. If you wanted to just do a single night, you would just cut it shorter, either going into McDowell or Fritz Landing. Either of those landings are in close proximity, and spending a night kind of near, this is the mouth of the Namekagon, where it meets the St. Croix. The rapids along the way, because they had mentioned small children, obviously everybody, I always wear my PDF, but certainly with little kids, um, the only thing to look for with, especially with kids or people who might not be strong swimmers, is to check the water levels on the river before you go. So it's typically the spring that you have to worry about it, but small kids you don't want to have on the St. Croix if the water is high. So I hope that answers the question. Again, I would put in, for the longer trip, put in at Whispering Pines and come down to Riverside. And for the shorter trip, say McDowell would be super short. This would be an easy, you can camp down near the mouth of the confluence of the two rivers, and then you're back out at Riverside at even lunchtime, you'd be done. So those would be my two recommendations for a 1 or 2 night with children.
Great. One more question here. Do designated campsites need to be booked in advance?
No, it's first come, first serve. So of course, it's just like the Boundary Waters. Whoever gets there first gets the site. I have never had a problem finding a site. Sometimes it's not the site that I wanted to be on, but I've never been homeless. Never been having. But the way it works is much like any time that you have first come first serve, is you want to start looking for your campsite earlier in the day. If they kind of have a safety net, the larger, I talked about these group campsites, they're actually designated, usually no more than one person takes them, but if you cannot find a place, or if it's really late, you are entitled, or they're allowed, you can have multiple people on the site. I've never seen people really do that because typically there's enough, but there is a safety valve there that you can always find a place, because the larger, the ones that are marked with the big bold tents are anybody can stay there, even if there's somebody else there you share.
Yeah. Someone's asking, what time of year do your guided trips start / end? Spring and fall?
Spring and fall, I run them between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's the total shoulder seasons with those are the high points. Although in the fall, I mean, September is so far away. If I've got interest, I would certainly run it'll be a custom trip in September. But I kind of have a schedule during the summer, and then the spring and fall are kind of based on demand.
Nice. Someone was asking where they can get a map, and I just typed in the link, the nps.gov.
Yep, that's where I got this one. It's a pretty good map, and also if you go to that website, there'll be it's a government website, so they'll kind of tell you more better than I can about rules and restrictions and numbers and things like that. But yeah, that map is free and available on the internet.
I think there's possibly even some. I mean, this is can this be used for navigation? Sure. Are there closer maps of the sections? I think so, but this would definitely work. This will get you by.
Oh, almost certainly. I mean, it's there's actually every single map, including Fisher maps and Mackenzie maps, always say not for navigation, not for navigation. But that's exactly that's what everybody buys them and use them. You're buying this expensive topographical map. But I will tell you, I have never bought or used a topographical map for the Namekagon, mostly because you can't get lost. You don't
right.
you don't need a topographical map. So
yeah, I wouldn't leave the compass at home just because it's so light. But I think you bring up a good point there.
Yep.
I don't
as you can see,
Oh, go ahead. I don't see any other questions. Someone did ask if you were primarily fishing for trout. I responded in the chat saying probably trout and smallmouth are probably the main species.
Those are the primary. I mean, those are the primary.
Yeah. I know from experience, personal experience. Great. Yeah, we have a few staff here that love going on the Namekagon. We have a few reps that have invited staff out on trips on the Namekagon for these. I've gotten out at Trigo before and done some of these other places. It's a wonderful trip. I do definitely have heard the comment that it is sort of a mini Boundary Waters, and
Yeah. That's what caught me because I've been such a Boundary Waters person, and then I just said, what's the mini Boundary Waters all about? And that's
right.
it's exactly it. It's a easier, closer version of going for the full-fledged Boundary Waters, and it's I love it for that. Oh, I wanted to point one thing about the map that I didn't say before. The only thing that's nice about, and the topos probably won't show this, all these little riffles are rapids. So they
Yeah.
show you where the rapids are. Again, my experience is you're just reading and running. You don't have to be looking for, oh, there's a rapid coming up and let's prepare. You're just, I've never paid attention to where these little rapid lines are too much. I mean, I know the river so well, so I know what I'm going to get into.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. It's nice to be able to at least anticipate what's coming up ahead, even on a very nice blue river like this. Um, just want to remind our viewers that all the presentations are being recorded. They'll be linked on the outdooradventureexpo.com site, and that'll send you over to our YouTube page where you can watch this and all the other previously recorded presentations. Got a pretty full day of more presentations today coming up, so stay tuned. Check out the schedule, and if you miss anything, like I said, they're going to be recorded. You can catch up with them later. There is Luna Rose Canoe Adventure, Paul Siegel's contact information there. You can reach out to them at Luna Rose Adventures, Luna Rose Canoe Adventures.com. Excuse me. Don't see any other questions. So, with that being said, why don't we sign off? And thank you so much, Paul. I really enjoyed meeting you. And I hope
I'm
we
glad
get
I
to.
could share.
Yeah, I'll look forward to saying hi to you on Saturday here at the shop. We're gonna have sort of
Sounds good.
a mini small sort of exhibitor pop up, and Luna Rose Canoe Adventures will be here at the shop on Saturday, May 1st. Kind of, I'd say probably like 9 to maybe 2ish or so. We'll have a coffee truck as well. It's kind of the last weekend of the expo, so there might be a line. We will be monitoring the door, but the coffee truck should help with those having to wait outside. But it should be a nice day, so bring a sun hat and some sunglasses. All right,
Okay,
Paul.
thanks everybody. Hope to see you on the water this summer.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.